Hello there, seeker of silence. There are roads that appear on maps inked with care and measured by distance, and then there are the other roads, the ones carried only in memory, whispered between those who know how to listen. If these quiet stories bring you peace, feel free to subscribe and stay a while by the fire. Tonight's tale begins far from crowded cities, beyond the reach of patrol banners and toll gates, where the land folds into long hills and forgotten paths linger beneath moss and thyme. The courier did not travel by the main road. He walked where the grass bent differently, where stones half buried in the earth hinted at an older way. His cloak, worn from many journeys, shifted with each careful step, blending him into the dull greens and greys of the land. A narrow leather satchel rested against his side. It was not large, nor did it appear remarkable, yet he kept one hand near it at all times, fingers brushing its edge as though confirming it remained. The wind moved low across the hills that evening, stirring dry stems and distant branches. Somewhere beyond the ridgeline, a patrol horn echoed once, then faded. He did not turn toward it. Instead, he angled his path downward, toward a shallow valley where the earth dipped and the light seemed to gather in softer tones. Few travelers noticed this descent. Fewer still would choose it. But he had been taught differently. Years ago, in a dim-lit room above a trading hall, an older courier had unfolded a piece of worn parchment. It held no roads drawn in ink, no borders or markings, only faint impressions, scratches, perhaps, or the memory of something erased. "The map is not what you see," the older man had said, tapping the page lightly. "It is what you remember after you stop looking." That lesson had stayed with him longer than any route. Now, as the last light of day stretched thin across the valley, he followed that memory. At the valley's base, a line of stones curved subtly, almost hidden beneath creeping vines. He slowed his pace, crouching for a moment to brush away loose dirt. The stones were smooth, shaped long ago, their edges softened by years of rain. A path, not one that welcomed footsteps, but one that tolerated them. He stood again, glancing briefly behind him. The horizon was empty now. The horn had not sounded again. Still, he moved forward with care. The path led him beneath a canopy of twisted trees, their branches arching together as though forming a passage. The air shifted there, cooler, carrying the faint scent of damp wood and something older, harder to place. He adjusted the strap of his satchel and continued. Time passed without measure in that place. The sky above faded from pale gold to deepening blue, though the trees held the last fragments of light longer than they should have. At one point he paused, not from fatigue, but from a sound, a low rustle just beyond the path. His hand moved, not to a weapon, but to a small object at his belt, a narrow piece of polished bone, etched with faint markings. He did not draw it, only touched it lightly. The rustling came again, then stopped. He waited. Minutes stretched. The wind shifted direction, carrying the scent of leaves and distant water. No movement followed. Slowly, he resumed walking. Not every danger announced itself. Some simply watched. Further along, the path began to rise again, leading toward a cluster of stone remnants. What once might have been a structure now stood as broken walls and half-collapsed arches, their shapes softened by creeping moss. He approached without haste. This was one of the markers. He stepped between the ruins, passing beneath an arch that leaned just enough to cast a long shadow. Within, the ground changed. Less soil, more stone, laid in uneven patterns. At the center, there was a circle. Not perfectly formed, not deliberate in the way of temples or altars, but distinct enough that he stopped when he reached its edge. He knelt, placing his satchel gently upon the ground. For a moment he did nothing, Then, carefully, he opened the satchel just enough to reach inside. His fingers brushed against the object within. It was cool, unmoving. Yet, as he held it for a breath, the air around him seemed to shift, just slightly, as though acknowledging its presence. He did not remove it. Not here. Instead, he closed the satchel again and rose to his feet. This was not the destination, only confirmation. The route remained intact. A faint smile crossed his face, brief, almost unnoticed. Then he turned, leaving the ruins behind, following the path as it curved toward the darker stretch of forest ahead. Night would come soon, and with it, the parts of the journey that could not be seen at all. The forest deepened as he moved forward, the last traces of dusk settling between the trunks like fading embers. The path beneath his boots became less certain, more suggestion than direction, yet he did not hesitate. He knew this stretch, or rather, he knew how to listen to it. Above him, branches crossed in uneven patterns, allowing fragments of sky to appear and vanish with each step. A pale star lingered in one of those openings, steady and distant, its light offering no guidance, only quiet companionship. The courier adjusted his pace. Not slower, not faster, simply measured. Each footfall was placed with care, avoiding loose stones, avoiding dry branches that might betray his presence. The forest had a way of amplifying small sounds, carrying them farther than expected. Somewhere ahead, water moved. He could not see it yet, but the faint rhythm reached him, soft, irregular, as though flowing over uneven ground. A stream, perhaps, or something deeper, hidden beneath the roots. He angled toward it. The air grew cooler as he approached, carrying a dampness that clung lightly to his cloak. Soon enough, the trees parted just enough to reveal a narrow channel cutting through the earth, its surface reflecting the dim sky in fractured patterns. He paused at its edge. This was not a crossing marked by stones or fallen logs. No convenient path revealed itself, but he had not expected one. Kneeling, he reached into his satchel once more. This time, he withdrew a small object, a thin piece of metal shaped like a leaf, its surface etched with lines too fine to catch in the fading light. He held it just above the water. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the surface of the stream shifted. Not a ripple, not a current. Something more deliberate. The reflection of the sky bent, twisting slightly, revealing darker lines beneath. Submerged stones, previously hidden, now appeared in a faint sequence across the channel. The courier exhaled softly. He stepped forward, placing his foot on the first stone. It held firm. Another step, then another. Each time his boot touched the surface, the water seemed to settle beneath him, as though accepting his weight without resistance. Behind him, the stones faded again, returning to their hidden state. When he reached the opposite bank, he did not look back. The leaf-shaped token was returned to its place, the satchel closed once more with careful hands. He continued. The forest shifted again as he moved deeper. The trees grew taller here, their trunks straighter, their bark marked with faint lines that caught what little light remained. Some of those markings were natural, some were not. He slowed slightly, brushing his fingers along one of the trunks as he passed. The grooves were shallow, deliberate, arranged in patterns that held meaning only to those taught to read them. A warning, not of immediate danger, but of presence. Others had passed through here, recently. He withdrew his hand and moved on. Time stretched again, the rhythm of his steps blending with the distant sound of water and the occasional whisper of wind through the higher branches. The world beyond the forest felt far away now, as though it belonged to another place entirely. Then a new sound, soft, low, a breath that did not belong to the wind. He stopped. The forest seemed to lean inward, holding its shape, its silence, waiting. Ahead, between two trees, something moved, not quickly, not with urgency. A shape, low to the ground, shifting just enough to catch his eye. The courier did not reach for a weapon. Instead, he lowered his posture slightly, his movements becoming even more deliberate. His gaze remained steady, not fixed directly upon the shape but aware of it, allowing it space. The creature emerged slowly. It was small, no larger than a fox, though its form was more elongated, its limbs slightly too thin for its body. Its fur, if it could be called that, held a muted sheen, catching fragments of light in uneven patches. Its eyes reflected faintly, not with hunger, but with curiosity. They regarded one another for a moment. The courier reached into a side pocket of his satchel, withdrawing a small piece of dried meat. He did not toss it, did not extend it directly. He simply placed it upon the ground between them and stepped back. The creature tilted its head, watching him. Then, with cautious movements, it approached the offering. Its steps were light, almost uncertain, as though testing the ground itself. It took the meat and retreated. No sound followed, no sudden movement. It disappeared into the undergrowth as quietly as it had appeared. The courier remained still for a moment longer. Then he resumed his path. Not all encounters required force. Some were simply acknowledgements. The forest began to thin after that, the trees spacing farther apart, allowing more of the night sky to emerge above. The ground sloped upward once more, leading toward a ridge that rose gently against the horizon. He knew what lay beyond it, or at least, what should. As he reached the crest, he paused. Before him stretched a wide expanse of land, broken by scattered rock formations and low grasses that moved with the night wind. In the distance, faint lights flickered, too steady to be stars, too distant to be torches. A settlement, or something resembling one. He studied it in silence. This was where the path grew uncertain again. The route he followed would not lead him directly there. It would curve around, pass through places less visible, less welcoming, safer. He adjusted the satchel at his side, ensuring its weight was balanced. Then, without lingering, he turned slightly and began descending along the unseen line that only memory could trace. The ridge fell away behind him as the land opened into long, uneven stretches of grass and stone. The forest no longer sheltered his path, and the night sky stretched wide above, layered with faint stars that shimmered between drifting clouds. The courier kept to the lower ground. Out in the open, movement carried farther. Silhouettes stood sharper against the horizon. He angled his steps along shallow depressions in the land, following lines carved long ago by rain and time. These subtle paths were easy to miss, unless one had been shown how to notice them. The distant lights remained ahead, steady and quiet. He did not move toward them. Instead, he let them remain slightly to his right, adjusting his course so they never aligned directly with his path. To approach openly would be simpler, but not wiser. Places that shone in the night often drew more than travelers. After a while, the ground shifted beneath his boots. Less grass, more stone. Flat surfaces began to emerge, worn smooth and arranged in ways that felt intentional. Not a road, not quite, but remnants of something that once guided many feet across this stretch of land. He slowed, scanning the edges. These old ways had a tendency to linger beneath newer dangers. A faint outline appeared ahead, a broken line of standing stones, spaced irregularly, some leaning, others half sunken into the earth. Their surfaces bore marks, not unlike those he had seen within the forest, though older, weathered nearly beyond recognition. He approached one of them, placing his hand lightly against its surface, cold, unyielding. Yet there was something beneath that stillness, a memory held within the stone itself, a trace of purpose that had not entirely faded. He closed his eyes briefly, then stepped back. This was another marker, not of direction, but of proximity. The route he followed was narrowing now, guiding him between places rather than through them. He moved on. The air changed as he passed the last of the stones. A faint scent of ash lingered, carried on the breeze from somewhere unseen. Not fresh, but not entirely gone either. He adjusted his cloak, pulling it slightly closer. Ahead, the land dipped once more, forming a shallow basin. At its center stood the remnants of what might once have been a structure, low walls, broken pillars, and a single archway that had somehow remained standing while the rest had fallen away. He paused at the edge of the basin. The scent of ash was stronger here. Not from a fire that burned tonight, but from one that had burned many nights before. He descended slowly. Each step was placed with care, the ground beneath him shifting slightly where loose stone gathered. As he reached the basin floor, the silence deepened, the open sky above feeling somehow more distant despite its vastness. He approached the arch. It stood alone, its surface marked with faint carvings that caught the starlight just enough to reveal their shapes. Not symbols he recognized, but not entirely unfamiliar either. He stepped beneath it. The temperature shifted slightly, cooler. He exhaled, the breath visible for a moment before fading into the air. Inside the ruins, the ground was smoother, the scattered debris arranged in subtle patterns that suggested purpose rather than collapse. Someone had been here, not long ago. A faint imprint in the dust caught his eye. Footprints, not many, not hurried, measured steps similar to his own. He followed them a short distance before they disappeared into the uneven stone, as though the path itself had chosen to conceal them. The courier reached for his satchel again, opening it just enough to brush his fingers against the artifact within. Still there, still as before. But this time, there was a faint warmth, not strong, not urgent, just present. He withdrew his hand, closing the satchel carefully. The ruins were not the destination, but they were part of something larger. He stepped out from beneath the arch, moving toward the far edge of the basin. As he climbed the gentle incline, a sound reached him, distant, irregular, carried by the shifting wind. Voices, low, indistinct. He stopped just before the crest. Ahead, beyond the rise, a narrow road cut across the land, its surface more defined than anything he had followed thus far. It curved gently toward the distant lights, the settlement he had seen earlier. And along that road, moving slowly in the night, was a patrol. Lanterns swayed with each step, casting small circles of light that revealed armored figures spaced evenly along the path. Their movements were unhurried, their presence steady. The courier crouched low, allowing the rise of the land to conceal him. He observed them for a moment, counted their number, watched the rhythm of their steps. There was no urgency in their patrol, but there was awareness. Their lanterns did not simply light their path. They searched the edges, the spaces where someone might choose to walk unseen. He shifted slightly, considering. The route he followed did not cross this road directly, but it came close enough that missteps could carry sound where it should not go. He waited. The patrol continued, their lanterns drifting slowly along the curve of the road. One of them paused briefly, lifting his light higher, scanning the darkness beyond. The courier remained still. The wind shifted, the grass bent. The moment passed. The patrol moved on. He exhaled, steady and controlled. Then, without rising fully, He adjusted his path, angling slightly farther from the road than he had intended. The route allowed for such changes. It was never fixed, never absolute. It adapted, and so did he. The ground grew rougher as he moved, scattered rocks replacing the smoother stretches of earth. His pace slowed again, each step deliberate, each movement calculated to avoid unnecessary sound. Above, the clouds shifted, revealing a broader expanse of stars. The distant lights of the settlement flickered once more, then dimmed slightly, as though obscured by something passing before them, or perhaps something passing between. The courier did not look toward them again. His path led elsewhere, deeper into the spaces between places. And the night, though vast, seemed to close in just enough to guide him forward. The land rose and fell in slow waves as he moved onward, the distant road and its lanterns now far behind. The air carried less of the ash scent from the ruins, replaced by something drier, touched by stone and open ground. He kept to the shadows cast by uneven terrain, allowing ridges and scattered outcrops to break his outline. Each shift in the wind was noted, each change in the ground beneath his boots quietly measured. After some time, the land began to change again. The grass thinned. The soil gave way to a pale, hardened surface that stretched outward in irregular patches. It did not crack like dry earth, nor shift like sand. It held firm, though faint lines ran through it, branching and curving in patterns that seemed almost deliberate. He slowed. This was not a place to cross without care. The courier crouched, placing one hand lightly against the ground. The surface was cool, smoother than expected. The faint lines beneath his fingers formed narrow channels, no deeper than the width of a fingernail, yet arranged with quiet intention. He studied them for a moment, then stood, adjusting his direction slightly. The route here was not visible in the usual way. It was felt, remembered through small details, where the lines converged, where they avoided one another, where the ground carried a subtle weight that guided rather than resisted. He stepped forward. Each movement was placed with care, his boots landing between the narrow channels rather than across them. The difference was small but noticeable. Where his foot avoided the lines, the ground remained still. Where it touched them, even lightly, there was a faint response. Not movement, not sound, but a presence, as though something beneath the surface had taken notice. He did not test it further. The crossing stretched wider than expected, the pale ground reflecting the dim starlight in muted tones. There were no trees here, no shelter, only the open sky and the quiet patterns beneath his feet. Halfway across, he paused. Not by choice. A sound reached him, faint, distant, but carried clearly across the stillness. A low hum. It did not come from above, nor from the horizon. It seemed to rise from beneath the surface itself, threading through the narrow channels in a pattern that was not entirely random. He remained still. The hum shifted slightly, rising and falling in slow intervals, as though following a rhythm too subtle to grasp. It did not approach. It did not retreat. It simply existed. The courier lowered his gaze, watching the lines at his feet. For a moment he thought he saw a faint glow pass through them, like light traveling beneath a thin layer of stone. Then it was gone. The hum faded with it. He exhaled, steady and controlled, then continued. The remainder of the crossing passed without further interruption. The pale ground gave way gradually to darker soil, then to scattered stones, then once more to grass that bent with the passing wind. He stepped onto firmer earth and did not look back. Not every path welcomed reflection. Ahead, the terrain shifted once more, rising into a series of low cliffs that formed a natural barrier. Their surfaces were uneven, broken by narrow ledges and shallow crevices that caught the starlight in thin lines. The route he followed did not climb these cliffs. It passed through them. He approached a section where the rock face curved inward slightly, forming a shallow recess. At first glance it appeared unremarkable, a shadowed indentation, no different from many others scattered along the cliff. But as he drew closer, subtle details emerged. The edges were too clean, the shadow too consistent. He reached out, pressing his hand against the stone. It shifted, not outward, but inward, just enough to reveal a narrow opening, barely wider than his shoulders. He stepped through. The passage beyond was confined, the walls close on either side, their surfaces smooth from long use. The air within was cooler, carrying the faint scent of mineral and damp stone. He moved without haste. The darkness here was deeper, the faint light from the entrance fading quickly behind him, yet he did not reach for a lantern. His steps remained sure, guided by memory and the subtle contours of the passage. After several turns, the space widened. A chamber opened before him, its ceiling low but stable, supported by natural formations that curved upward like the ribs of some ancient structure. The floor was level, marked by faint impressions left by those who had passed through before. At the center, a small stone platform rose slightly above the ground. He approached it. There were no markings upon its surface, no carvings, no symbols, only a smooth, flat space, as though it had been shaped not by tools, but by repetition. He set his satchel upon it. For a moment he stood there, his hands resting lightly on the worn leather. Then, slowly, he opened it. The artifact within remained unseen, concealed by layers of cloth. He did not uncover it fully. Instead, he adjusted its position slightly, aligning it with the center of the platform. As he did, the air within the chamber shifted, not dramatically, just enough to be noticed. A faint current moved through the space, brushing against the walls, stirring the stillness that had settled there. The courier stepped back. The artifact did not move, but the space around it seemed to acknowledge its presence, the quiet of the chamber deepening in response. He waited. Moments passed. Nothing more followed. The current faded. The air returned to its previous stillness. He exhaled, then stepped forward once more, lifting the satchel carefully from the platform. This place, like the ruins before it, was not the destination, only a point along the way. He closed the satchel, securing it firmly, and turned toward the far side of the chamber. Another passage awaited, narrow, unmarked. He stepped into it without hesitation. Behind him, the chamber remained as it had been, still unchanged, holding its quiet purpose as it had for years beyond count. Ahead, the path continued. And with it, the sense that the journey was drawing closer to something not yet revealed. The passage narrowed again, the stone pressing closer as he moved forward. The air held a faint chill, though not unpleasant, and each step carried a soft echo that faded quickly against the curved walls. He did not rush. In places like this, speed had little value. The ground beneath him shifted gradually, from solid stone to a finer layer of dust that gathered in shallow patterns. His boots left faint marks behind him, though even those seemed to soften as the air moved gently through the passage. After some time, the corridor bent slightly to the left, then widened just enough to allow a dim glow to appear ahead. Not bright, not sudden, a quiet, steady light. He slowed, approaching with care. The passage opened into a second chamber, larger than the first, though less enclosed. The ceiling rose higher here, broken by narrow openings where faint strands of night sky could be seen above. Through those openings, thin beams of starlight descended, touching the stone floor in pale, scattered shapes. At the center of the chamber stood a structure unlike the platform before. A circular frame crafted from interwoven stone and metal, its edges worn but intact. It did not resemble a doorway, nor an altar. It simply stood there, as though it had been placed with a purpose that no longer required explanation. The courier approached slowly. His steps remained measured, his gaze steady upon the structure. As he drew closer, he noticed faint etchings along its surface, lines and curves that mirrored in subtle ways the patterns he had seen earlier in the pale ground beyond the cliffs. Not identical, but related. He paused just outside the circle. Then, once again, he set his satchel upon the ground. The air here felt different, not heavier, not lighter, just aware. He knelt, opening the satchel with deliberate care. This time he allowed the layers of cloth to part slightly. Within, the artifact rested, small enough to fit within both hands, yet shaped with a precision that set it apart from ordinary craft. Its surface held a muted glow, not bright enough to cast light, but steady enough to be seen even in the dim chamber. It was not perfectly smooth. Fine lines traced across it, intersecting in patterns that echoed the markings of stone and ground he had followed since the beginning of his journey. He lifted it carefully. For a moment, nothing changed. Then, as he held it within the space of the circular frame, the faint beams of starlight above seemed to shift, their angles aligning just enough to touch the surface of the artifact. A soft reflection spread across its edges, not a flash, not a flare, just a quiet response. The courier remained still. The air stirred slightly, moving through the chamber in slow currents that brushed against his cloak. The structure before him seemed to hum, not with sound, but with a subtle tension, as though something within it had begun to align. He did not step into the circle. Not yet. Instead, he lowered the artifact slightly, observing. The light adjusted with it, not following, but responding. He tilted it once more. The lines upon its surface caught the starlight differently now, revealing patterns that had not been visible before. Pathways, intersections, shapes that extended beyond the object itself, as though mapping something larger. He exhaled, steady. This was not the destination, but it was closer. Carefully, he returned the artifact to the satchel, wrapping it once more in cloth. The glow dimmed as it was covered, though a trace of warmth remained. He secured the satchel and stood. The circular structure did not change as he stepped away. The light above remained, the chamber holding its quiet arrangement as though nothing had occurred. Yet something had. A piece of the root had revealed itself, not in space, but in understanding. He turned toward the far side of the chamber. Another passage led onward, wider than the last, its floor more even, as though used more frequently. He followed it. The air shifted again as he moved, losing the cool mineral scent of the chambers behind him and taking on something more open, more distant. A faint breeze found its way through the passage, carrying with it traces of night air and something else. Something older, harder to name. After several turns, the passage began to rise. The incline was gentle but steady, guiding him upward toward an unseen exit. The walls widened slightly, the ceiling lifting just enough to allow more of that faint breeze to pass through. He continued without pause. At last, the passage opened. He stepped out into the open once more. The night had deepened. The stars above were clearer now, the clouds having drifted aside to reveal a broader expanse of sky. The air felt cooler here, carrying the distant scent of stone and dry grass. He stood upon a high ledge, the land stretching out before him in long, uneven lines. Far below, the faint lights he had seen earlier flickered once more, though now they appeared smaller, more distant. He had passed beyond them. Ahead, the terrain shifted again, descending gradually into a region marked by darker shapes, low structures perhaps, or formations of stone arranged in ways that felt less natural. He studied them in silence. This was not part of the path he had been shown, not directly. And yet, the markings on the artifact, the patterns revealed within the chamber, had suggested something more, a continuation beyond the known route, a divergence. He adjusted the satchel at his side, ensuring it rested securely. Then, after a moment of stillness, he began his descent, not along the path he had followed before, but along one that had only just begun to reveal itself. The ground beneath his boots shifted once more, carrying him toward a place that did not appear on any memory he had been given, and yet it felt as though he had been walking toward it all along. The descent carried him into darker ground, where the shapes he had seen from above slowly took form. What had first appeared as scattered stone revealed itself, little by little, as a field of structures, low, angular, arranged without the order of a village, yet not entirely without design. They did not rise high. Most stood no taller than a man, their surfaces worn, edges softened by time and weather. Some leaned slightly, others had settled deeper into the earth, as though the land had drawn them inward over the years. The courier moved carefully among them. The ground here was uneven, broken by shallow depressions and narrow ridges that shifted beneath his weight. Fine dust gathered in the hollows, disturbed only by the faint traces of wind that passed between the structures. He slowed, not from uncertainty, but from recognition. This place had not been part of the routes he had learned, and yet it felt connected. He reached for the satchel, opening it just enough to rest his fingers against the artifact within. The warmth was still there, faint but steady. As he moved deeper into the field, that warmth shifted slightly, growing more defined, as though responding to something ahead. He followed it. The structures grew closer together, their arrangement forming subtle corridors that guided his path without forcing it. Some surfaces bore faint markings, lines, intersections, patterns that echoed what he had seen within the chambers behind him, not identical, but aligned. He passed one structure where the markings were clearer, etched deeper into the stone. He paused, brushing his fingers lightly across them. They were not worn by time alone. They had been traced again, more recently. He withdrew his hand. Someone else had come here, not long ago. The thought did not trouble him, but it changed the shape of the path ahead. He continued, moving between the structures, allowing the faint pull of the artifact to guide him. The air here was still, the breeze from above no longer reaching the spaces between the stone. Then, ahead, the arrangement shifted. The structures opened into a wider clearing, at the center of which stood something different. Not low, not worn. A single pillar rose from the ground, taller than the rest, its surface smoother, its edges more defined. It did not lean, nor had it settled into the earth. It remained, as it had been placed. The courier approached slowly. The ground around the pillar was clear, free of debris, as though kept that way by unseen hands or by something more subtle. No footprints marked the dust, no signs of passage. Only the pillar itself, standing in quiet purpose. He stopped at its base. For a moment he simply observed. The surface of the pillar held markings similar to those he had followed since the beginning. Lines, intersections, shapes that seemed to shift depending on how they were viewed. But here, they were more complete, less broken by time. He opened the satchel. Carefully he removed the artifact. Its faint glow returned, stronger now, responding to the presence of the pillar. The warmth in his hands deepened slightly, though it remained steady, controlled. He lifted it. As he brought it closer to the surface of the pillar, the markings upon both began to align, not physically, but visually. as though one revealed the pattern of the other. Lines that had seemed separate now formed continuations. Shapes that had appeared incomplete now closed into quiet symmetry. The air shifted. A faint current moved outward from the pillar, passing over him through the clearing and into the spaces between the structures. The courier remained still. He did not press the artifact against the stone. He did not force the connection. He simply held it, allowing the alignment to settle. For a moment, it felt as though the space around him had expanded, not in size but in awareness. The field of structures, the chambers beneath the cliffs, the pale ground with its hidden lines, all of it seemed to exist within the same quiet pattern. A network, not of roads, but of places. The warmth in the artifact shifted again, not stronger, but clearer, as though pointing not to the pillar, but beyond it. The courier lowered his hands. The markings returned to their previous state, the alignment fading gently, leaving only the faint glow upon the artifact. He exhaled, then wrapped it once more, returning it to the satchel. The pillar remained unchanged, its purpose fulfilled, or perhaps only begun. He stepped back, his gaze lingering for a moment longer. This had not been the destination. Not entirely, but it had revealed something more. The route he followed was not a simple path from one place to another. It was a sequence, and he was only partway through it. He turned. The clearing stretched behind him, the low structures forming their quiet corridors once more. Beyond them, the land would rise again, leading toward regions he had not yet seen. The warmth of the artifact remained steady at his side, guiding, not with urgency, but with quiet certainty. He began to walk. The field of stone receded behind him, its shapes blending back into the darkness as distance grew. The ground beneath his boots shifted once more, from dust to soil, from soil to scattered rock. The air changed again. A faint breeze returned, carrying with it the scent of distant trees and something else, something older, more settled. Ahead, the land rose gently, forming a low ridge that curved across the horizon. He moved toward it. The climb was gradual, each step bringing him higher, the structures behind him fading entirely from view. The sky above remained clear, the stars steady in their quiet arrangement. At the crest, he paused. Beyond the ridge, the land opened once more. But this time it did not stretch into emptiness or scattered formations. It held presence. Not a settlement, not a patrol. Something else. A structure, larger than the pillar, larger than the ruins he had passed before. Its shape was difficult to define at this distance, its edges blending into the darkness, its form partially concealed by the land itself. He studied it in silence. The artifact at his side grew warmer, not sudden, not urgent, but unmistakable. He adjusted the satchel, then began his descent. Whatever awaited below was no longer part of the path he had been taught. It was something that had waited for him to arrive. The slope carried him downward in long, steady lines, the distant structure growing clearer with each step. It did not rise like a tower, nor spread like a fortress. Instead, it seemed to rest within the land itself, its form shaped by both intention and time. Stone walls curved outward from a central point, partially embedded into the hillside. Their surfaces were smooth in places, worn in others, as though touched by many hands across years that no longer held memory. The courier did not rush. The warmth from the satchel remained steady now, no longer shifting, no longer guiding, simply present, as though it had reached a point of quiet agreement with the place ahead. As he drew closer, a narrow path revealed itself, not marked by stones or carvings, but by absence. The ground there held fewer imperfections, fewer interruptions, as though passage had been made easier through repetition. He followed it. The air here carried a different weight. Not heavier, but settled. The wind that had moved across the open land slowed as it reached the structure, slipping along the curved walls rather than passing through. At the base of the central formation, an opening waited, not concealed, not guarded, simply there. Its edges were clean, its shape deliberate, though time had softened its sharper lines. No light emerged from within, yet the darkness did not feel empty. The courier paused before it. For a moment he placed his hand against the satchel, feeling the faint warmth beneath the layers of cloth. Then, without hesitation, he stepped forward and crossed the threshold. Inside, the space widened gradually. The passage curved gently, leading him deeper without revealing its full extent. The walls held no markings, no signs to follow. Only smooth stone and the faint echo of his steps carried just far enough to remind him of the space around him. After several turns, the passage opened. A chamber lay before him, broader than the others he had passed through, its ceiling rising high above, disappearing into shadow. The floor was level, its surface untouched by dust or debris. At the center stood a structure, not a pillar, not a platform, something between the two. A raised form, wide enough to hold more than one object, yet shaped with a simplicity that suggested it required only one. He approached slowly. Each step carried him closer, the air around him growing more still, as though the chamber itself held its breath, not in tension, but in anticipation long since settled into quiet patience. He reached the center. The structure awaited. He set the satchel upon it. For a moment he did not move. Then, with steady hands, he opened it. The layers of cloth parted fully this time. The artifact rested within, its faint glow now clear, no longer concealed. He lifted it. The moment it left the satchel, the chamber responded, not with light, not with sound, but with presence. The space around him seemed to shift slightly, the air aligning in a way that felt complete. He placed the artifact upon the structure. It settled without resistance, as though it had always belonged there. The glow deepened, not brighter, but fuller. The markings upon its surface aligned with faint impressions on the stone beneath it, patterns that had been invisible until that moment, now revealing themselves in quiet harmony. The courier stepped back. He did not touch it again. The chamber held its stillness. Time passed. Though here it felt less like passing and more like settling, the artifact remained, unmoving, its purpose fulfilled, or perhaps only begun. The courier exhaled slowly. Then, without haste, he turned. There was nothing more to place, nothing more to adjust. Yet as he took his first step away from the structure, a subtle shift moved through the chamber, not behind him, not ahead, but around him. A faint change, barely noticeable, as though something beyond the visible had begun to move. He paused, only for a moment, then continued. The passage behind him awaited, unchanged, leading back through the curved stone and toward the open night beyond. His steps carried him through it, the quiet echo following at a respectful distance. When he emerged once more into the open air, the sky above had shifted slightly, the stars tracing their slow paths across the dark. The land before him was the same, and yet not. The path he had followed no longer held the same pull. The markers he had passed, the stones, the ruins, the chambers, all remained, but their purpose had altered. They no longer guided him forward. They simply existed. He adjusted the strap of the now lighter satchel. For the first time since the journey began, his hand did not return to it. He walked, not toward the distant lights, not toward the ridge behind him, but along a line that had not been shown, not marked, not remembered. The wind moved across the land once more, bending the grass in quiet patterns. Somewhere far behind him, beneath stone and time, the artifact rested within its place, its presence now part of something larger, something that extended beyond paths and couriers and destinations. The night continued, and the road, whatever shape it now held, stretched onward, without urgency, without demand, and carrying him gently into whatever waited next.